I still remember the sound of 3 knocks on my apartment door that evening. Not 2 knocks, not 4, 3 slow, careful knocks. When I opened the door, my neighbor was standing there with a small brown package in his hands. He looked nervous. He looked at the name on the package, then looked directly at me. "This yours?" he asked. I told him I had never seen it before. He became completely silent. Then he said something that I still think about today. "It was delivered here 20 years ago too." Everyone, my name is Daniel, and today I'm going to tell you about one of the strangest experiences of my life. It started with a package I never ordered. At the time, I was 34 years old and living alone in a small apartment building in a quiet town outside Boston. I worked as a graphic designer for a local company, and my life was pretty ordinary. I woke up at 7 every morning, went to work, came home around 6, cooked something simple, watched television, and went to bed. Nothing exciting happened to me, at least that's what I thought. I had lived in that apartment for almost 8 months. The building was old, but it was comfortable. There were 12 apartments, 6 on each floor. My neighbor, Mr. Harris, lived across the hallway. He was probably in his late 60s. He didn't talk much, but he was polite. Sometimes we said hello in the hallway. Sometimes he helped me carry heavy packages upstairs. I knew almost nothing about him. That changed on a cold Tuesday evening. I had just returned from work when I noticed a small package sitting outside my apartment door. There was no delivery message on my phone. I hadn't ordered anything. Still, I assumed someone had made a mistake. The package had my full name on it, Daniel Carter. I picked it up and looked at the shipping label. The address was correct. My apartment number was correct, but the sender's name was strange. There was no company name, no return address. Only one word was printed in the sender section, unknown. I thought it was probably some kind of mistake, maybe a gift from a friend, maybe something I had ordered months earlier and forgotten about. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I noticed something even stranger. The package was sealed with old-fashioned brown tape, not the normal clear tape used by modern delivery companies. The cardboard also looked old, very old. For a few minutes, I simply stared at it. Then I heard 3 knocks. I opened my door. Mr. Harris was standing there. He was holding another package. It looked almost identical to mine. "Is this yours?" he asked. I looked at the box in his hands. I said, "But I have one just like it." His face changed immediately. "What did you say?" I pointed toward my kitchen. "I got one about 5 minutes ago." Harris stepped closer. For the first time since I had moved into the building, I saw real fear in his eyes. "Where is?" showed him. He stared at the package for several seconds. Then he whispered, "This happened before." "What happened before?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the name on my package. Then he looked at me. "Daniel," he said slowly. "What is your father's name?" I felt confused. "Robert." Harris went completely still. My father had died 15 years earlier. He had never met Mr. Harris. At least, I was almost certain he hadn't. "Why are you asking about my father, Mr.?" Harris looked down at the floor. "I think you need to open that package." I laughed nervously. "You're the one who just told me this happened before." "Yes." "When?" He looked at me. 20 years ago." Smile disappeared. I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't explain. Instead, he told me something that made no sense. 20 years ago, a package like that was delivered to this building. Who received it? A man who lived in your apartment. Heart started beating faster. Harris didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Your father." I thought he was joking. My father had never lived in this town. As far as I knew, he had spent most of his adult life in Ohio. But Mr. Harris insisted. He told me that 20 years earlier, my father had rented the exact apartment I was living in now. I couldn't believe him. I called my mother. She answered after a few rings. "Mom, did Dad ever live in Massachusetts?" There was a long silence. Then she asked, "Why are you asking?" That question frightened me more than anything else. I told her about the apartment. I told her about the package. I told her what Mr. Harris had said. My mother didn't respond for several seconds. Finally, she said quietly, "You need to leave that package alone." "Why, Daniel, please." "Mom, what happened 20 years ago?" She started crying. My mother almost never cried. That night, she told me something I had never heard before. 20 years earlier, my father had disappeared for almost 3 months. She had always told me that he had been away for work. That was a lie. He hadn't been working. He had been in Massachusetts, and he had been staying in my apartment. I didn't know what to say. I asked her why she had hidden this from me. She said she was afraid. Afraid of what? She didn't answer. Then she told me something even stranger. My father had received a package during that time. A package that looked exactly like mine. He opened it. After that, everything changed. My father returned home 3 months later, but he refused to talk about what had happened. He never explained where he had been. He never explained the package. And according to my mother, he made her promise never to ask. I sat alone in my apartment for almost an hour after the call ended. The package was still sitting on my kitchen table. I wanted to open it. At the same time, I was terrified of what I might find. Finally, I called Mr. Harris. He answered immediately. "Did your father tell you anything?" he asked. "No, I thought he might." "Mr. Harris, what happened 20 years ago?" he sighed. Then he said, "Come across the hall." I walked into his apartment. His living room was filled with old photographs, books, and boxes. He went to a cabinet and pulled out a small metal box. Inside were several photographs. He handed one to me. It showed the apartment building, but the picture was taken 20 years earlier. Then he handed me another photograph. This one showed a group of 3 men standing outside the building. I recognized one of them immediately, my father. I stared at the photograph. "Who are the other 2? Mr. Harris pointed to an older man. His name was Michael. Then he pointed to the 3rd man. That was Thomas. What did they have to do with my father? Mr. Harris sat down. They were friends. What kind of friends? The kind who made one terrible mistake. I waited. He finally told me the story. 20 years earlier, my father had come to Massachusetts because Michael had asked him for help. Michael had discovered evidence that someone at a local company was stealing money. He wanted to expose it, but before he could do that, he disappeared. My father and Thomas tried to find him. They believed Michael had left town, but then they received a package. Inside was a message telling them to stop searching. They didn't. A few days later, another package arrived. That one contained photographs. The photographs proved that Michael had been alive after he disappeared, but they also showed something else. Someone had been watching my father for weeks. My father became frightened. He went back to Ohio, but he never forgot Michael. According to Mr. Harris, the case was eventually closed. Michael was never found. Thomas left the state, and my father never talked about it again. I looked at the package sitting in my apartment. Why would someone send this to me now? Mr. Harris shook his head. I don't know. Then why did you receive one too? He looked uncomfortable. I didn't receive it for me. Do you mean? He pointed at the box. There is a name on mine. I looked at the label. The name wasn't Harris. It was Thomas. I felt a chill run through my body. Thomas was the 3rd man in the photograph. The man who had disappeared from the story 20 years ago. Where did you get this? Mr. Harris said it had been sitting outside his door. There was no explanation, no message, no return address. We decided to open my package together. I used a small knife to cut the tape. Inside was an old envelope. There were no valuables, no money, no photographs, just one handwritten letter. My hands started shaking when I saw the first line. It said, "Daniel, if you are reading this, your father never told you the truth." I stopped breathing for a moment. The letter was signed with one name, Michael, the missing man. The letter explained everything. Michael had discovered that the company he worked for was hiding illegal payments, but he had also discovered that someone inside the company was helping criminals move money through fake businesses. He had collected evidence. He planned to give it to the police. Before he could, someone discovered what he was doing. Michael became afraid that his life was in danger, so he created a plan. He asked my father and Thomas to help him hide the evidence, but they didn't know the entire plan. Michael had created several copies of the evidence and hidden them in different places. The first package had been a warning, the second package had been a test, and the final package was supposed to be delivered years later to someone Michael trusted. That someone was my father. But my father never received it. Instead, the package had disappeared. Michael wrote that he had gone into hiding. He had survived. He had changed his name. He had built a new life somewhere far away, but he had never forgotten my father. Then I reached the final paragraph. It said, "Your father protected me when he had every reason to be afraid. I owe him my life. I also owe you the truth," was one final sentence. Look inside the wall behind the old bookshelf. I looked at Mr. Harris. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. We went back to my apartment. The old bookshelf had been there when I moved in. I had never moved it because it was extremely heavy. Together, we pushed it away from the wall. There was nothing unusual at first. Then I noticed a small crack in the wood. Mr. Harris touched it. The wooden panel moved. Behind it was a narrow space. Inside was a small metal box. My heart was pounding. We opened it. Inside were old photographs, copies of financial records, and a letter from my father. I recognized his handwriting immediately. The letter wasn't addressed to my mother. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Michael. My father explained that he had discovered Michael was alive. He had known the truth for years, but he had promised to keep Michael's location secret. The reason was simple. Michael had started a new life. He had a wife. He had children. If his identity became public, they could all be in danger. My father had chosen silence to protect him. But there was something my father didn't know. Michael had been trying to contact him for years. The packages had been attempts to reconnect. The final package had been meant for my father, but by then my father was gone, so Michael sent it to me. I sat on the floor holding my father's letter. For 20 years, I had believed my father had simply disappeared for work. I had believed my mother had been protecting me from an ordinary family problem, but the truth was much more complicated. My father had been protecting a man who was still alive, a man who had trusted him, a man whose life might have been destroyed if the truth had come out. A few weeks later, I received another letter. This one had no return address. It contained only one sentence. Your father was a good man. Now you know why. I never learned exactly where Michael lived. I never met him. I never learned whether he was still alive today, but I finally understood something about my father. Sometimes silence isn't caused by a lack of love. Sometimes people keep secrets because they believe the truth could hurt someone. Was my father right to keep such a huge secret? I still don't know. But I do know this. For most of my life, I thought I knew my father. Then one mysterious package showed me that a person can carry an entire hidden story inside them. And sometimes the smallest thing, a package outside your door, a photograph, or a letter written years ago, can open a door to a past you never knew existed. That experience changed the way I look at people. Now, whenever I meet someone who seems quiet or distant, I remind myself that I may know only a small part of their story, because everyone has a past. And sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it knocks 3 times on your door.